Hey everybody, Plushy here, and I just wanted to make a short, casual video, sort of revamping my list for the top 5 SSRs for NA next year. And I made the video last year, labeled as the top 5 SSRs released this year for JP 2023. And of course, for NA, since it's a 2-year gap, this would be the same list. But after a whole year of playing since then, I have shifted a lot of my opinions and even moved some servants off and on the list. So I just wanted to give you an updated version of that list. And of course, I have hot take videos on all of these servants, and I would link them in the description if you want more information. So I'm not going to deep dive into each servant's kit in this video, but I'll just bullet point list out why I feel like they deserve the placement and why I moved them compared to the last time. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into today's list. So before we actually get into the top 5, I have 2 honorable mentions. And the first honorable mention is going to be Melusine. And she was on the top 5 list last year. And this obviously means that she is no longer on it. The main reason behind that is just there's so many AoE arts loopers, good ones as well. We got 3 more this year. There's no doubt that Melusine is a top tier arts looper. She has an 80 MP battery. Nobody else has that. She has still really good refund despite the 80 MP battery. She has an anti-chaotic power mod and anti-earth SE on her MP, so technically 2 anti-traits, and she can ramp up her crit mod, and she has good star generation on her skill. So everything about her is really good, right? But the problem is there's just so many options. This year we got Marie Alter, who evidently is not as good as Melusine as an arts looper, but we also got Space Arash, which in my opinion has a higher ceiling than Summer Melusine as an arts looper. And of course we also got BB Dubai, who is not as good as an arts looper as Melusine, but can serve as one, but also a lot more because of her supportability. So Melusine, just in this sea of AoE arts units, no longer stand out that much. She's still top tier, don't get me wrong. If you like her a lot and you decide to 120 her, she's still gonna beat most content for you. But it's just if you plan to roll for any future AoE arts loopers like Space Arash, for example, then you might not want to go all in on this one. If you already have another, once again, Summer Ibuki is one of the most popular and most pulled characters in the game probably. And if you already have her, then Melusine, especially considering her anti-trait is also anti-earth, just doesn't look that great in the face of, that monster essentially. My second honorable mention is going to be Tiamat. And Tiamat was already a highly requested character last time, and for good reasons, right? Because she's obviously known best for her insane buster looping damage when you have Black Grail, because she's one of the rare buster loopers that can do double Vich Oberon by using Black Grail. And she has insane buster ramp up on MP, of course, 30% buster up every turn. So on the 3rd turn, she would have 90% buster up just from her MP actually. She has even more on her skill set. She did actually get buffed during the implementation of Append 5 this year, because her second skill is a 6-turn cooldown steroid that isn't tied to any battery. So now she could use it again on turn 2 with double light, and her wave 2 damage would be even better. Overall, I think she's a really solid servant, of course, but she has a couple of issues. First is her reliance on Black Grail, because her damage is still good, even when she uses a 50 MP starting charge CE, but she has a lot more competitors now. If she doesn't get to use Super Black Grail during a lot of events where there are damage CEs with 50 MP starting charge. So unless she's doing multi-core in those cases, her damage is not going to be as standout as, when she gets to use Black Grail. The second problem is, of course, her alter ego class. I already explained in my Phantasmoon video, where alter ego can be a good thing if you don't have the most investment into a character and you still want them to break a certain threshold for damage. Then being an alter ego or pretender is really good, because you have that 1.5 times extra class advantage damage to help you push that. But Tiamat is sort of a character that is designed to be fully invested in, because you want her to be your omni buster looper, but her class prevents her from doing that. I genuinely believe she would probably be better if she was a neutral only class like Avenger or whatever for most people. And then finally, she doesn't have an anti-trait, so her damage is obviously very insane, but if you're using her in like a challenge quest instead of a normal looping comp, it's not going to feel that standout. I still like her challenge quest performance because especially that full debuff cleanse on MP before damage is really useful against certain bosses. Her kit overall is just not that crazy for that either. So she's very close. She's very close to getting onto the 5th spot, and there's definitely an argument to swap her place with the 5th spot on my list. Number 5 on my list is going to be Tez Kalipolka. And I think he was number 4 last time, so basically has the same placement. He's still one of the best multi-core DPS units in the game, mainly because of that skill 2. It's a self 50 MP charge and party member 30 MP charge. Party-wide 30 chargers are still rare even to this day, and it's one of the best battery spreads overall in the game. And he can potentially charge even more because his MP charges the entire party, including himself, with 10 more MP. He also has that very unique skill 1 that is a double charisma for whoever has guts. So double Tez is a very good core to build around for convenient fast farming, because double Tez provides so much charge that the 3rd DPS doesn't need to have their own battery. They only need to have a maxed out Append 2 in order to MP on wave 3. And obviously if they have any form of battery, then they could MP as well. You could also use like a Mystic Code that has MP charge. So for farming free quests and stuff, double Tez plus whatever is super convenient, right? And as a DPS himself, Tez is also pretty solid. His skill 3's guts itself is pretty lackluster. It's just for his skill 1 to double buff, but it also has anti-super large and anti-divine power mods. Divine is common, of course, and super large is not, but super large is actually common on like 1 enemy waves. So even though he's a single target, if the 1 enemy is divine and super large at the same time, he'd be doing really good damage against them still. So this can come into play when farming. His MP is also really insane for an AoE Arts Looper. It has Info Pierce, and it has the same ramp up as Space Ishtar, right? 20% MP damage up for 3 turns before damage. And also it charges the entire party with 10 MP, so it helps with Castoria for getting their MP if you want to push damage with them, and also it helps himself refund, of course. But of course, Tez also has a couple of problems. First and foremost is competition. There are more and more good party buffers in the game ever since he came out. Like one of the units that you might not expect me to bring up is actually Space Aresh. Space Aresh has party-wide 20 MP charge and self 50 on top of the party-wide 20, unlike Tez. So she has self 70 MP charge and party-wide 20. It's probably not as good as Tez's like self 50 and party 30, but still, it's a decent amount of total charge that also helps the party. And her party-wide buff is a 20% attack up and MP damage up for 3 turns. And Tez, on the other hand, if your DPS doesn't have guts, it's just a 20% attack up. And compared to a lot of other multi-core farmers like Lohi, like BB Dubai as well, his party-wide buff is just not that great in comparison. And second of all, his own damage in a non-double Tez setup is not great. Like even in double Tez is not like super high, but at least he gets 80% attack up. But because he's an assassin, when he's hitting neutral, his damage is not going to be amazing, right? And he also doesn't get to ramp up in a multi-core setup. So if you're using him as sort of just a splash in inclusion to support your other DPS and he just clears a wave, that wave he might have some trouble clearing, even if it's just like turn 1 of a 90++. If you only have him like at MP1, his assassin neutral damage is not amazing. As an AoE Arts Looper, same issue with Melusine. There are so many good ones nowadays. Like he's a really good one, but once again, he's an assassin. So compared to other dedicated AoE Arts Loopers, like Space Haresh again, he's gonna be a lot more lackluster. Like as a normal AoE Arts farmer, he's actually probably a little bit worse than Space Ishtar. So compared to some of the other higher tier ones, he's not gonna be able to compete in that aspect as well. So overall, I think both his roles have very strong contenders, and they've just become stronger and stronger each year. So he feels less and less unique every year, despite his ability to fill both of these roles really well. Number 4 on my list is going to be Draco. And I know this is going to be a controversial one, because to some people, she's the most broken shit released ever. And I don't blame them, because she has an unlosable matchup against servants of these 7 classes. She takes half damage, she deals 1.5 or double to berserkers, and she also deals anti-trait damage against them with her MP. So if she's against any of these enemies, she is the best counter in the entire game, period. Especially special against berserker, because she also takes half from berserkers, which is super rare in this game. Her skill 3 is insane. It has so much utility. It has buff removal resist. It has ignore defense for 3 turns, which is a super rare buff on a skill. It has debuff immunity for 1 time 3 turns. And it has 2 anti-traits, right? Anti-Roman, which she can apply with a command code for boss fights. And Anti-Dragon, which is not that rare, especially gives her some non-servant coverage, right? And it also, of course, charges her MP and gives her stars per turn. And overall, she just has really good MP per turn, which is 30 passively. And she has like decent refund for a single target because she has a lot of hits on her MP. So she can spam her MP pretty well with just the MP itself. It refunds a lot. So in farming, if you can't get her first MP to fire, her following MPs is going to be pretty easy to use. So what's the problem with this character, right? She seems so broken. Well, first and foremost, her class is way too volatile. She is completely unusable against extra classes, and that used to not be a problem, but as you can see last year, there are so many extra class enemies, right? Not just from main story, but also in 90++ farming, challenge quests, and now raids. The 2 Neko Arc raids are also all extra. So she's just completely unusable against any of these. And on top of that, her damage is actually kind of lackluster against non-servants. In a boss fight, she can kind of fix it with the Roman command code, unless the boss has debuff immunity. But in farming, you do feel that. Even if you're against enemies of the standard 7 classes, when you're not against a servant, her damage is not great at all. And we have got the 90++s where the wave 3 final boss is not a servant. Like next year's Christmas event, the 90++ has a demon pillar as its final boss. So her damage is just very lackluster compared to other options, right? Also, a lot of like Lost Belt enemies are not considered servants either. Like most of the fairies in Lost Belt 6 are not servants. They're just fairies. So anti-servant doesn't actually have as good as a coverage as it sounds, because on paper it sounds like it is basically omni coverage, right? But even if the enemy looks like a servant, sometimes they're not servants. And her skill set outside of her skill 3 is pretty mid. Her skill 1 especially, a 6-hit damage cut and 30% crit up on a 7-turn cooldown is not great. Like, this skill should have 50% crit up at the very least, and it will still probably be worse than just a straight up 3-turn 50% crit up. And that skill would have had a 6-turn cooldown. So the first skill is just a mess. The second skill, the attack up at 40%, is really good, but it has a big demerit of charging all enemies MP gauge by 1, and you can't even use it strategically because you need this skill too to apply the Holy Grail status on herself. Because if she doesn't have it, her skill 3 is also complete trash. Like, the skill 3 loses 90% of its effects if she doesn't have the Holy Grail status. And her MP literally does nothing outside of the damage itself if it's not against a servant. It has no other secondary effect other than the anti-trait. And she has a triple buster deck, which I used to be a little bit torn on. I thought it could be good. It's not, because her best comp is just arts. So you want to spam her MP as much as possible. You're going to run into situations where her MP refunded like 80, and you would love if you just had any cards of hers that gains any bit of MP, but she would just have 3 busters, and you would not be able to use her MP back to back. She would have definitely been way better if she had double buster, double arts as her deck. And overall, I just think this character is too reliant on her class to be broken. And despite how broken she is when she's in the right situations, the game can easily screw her over if the game wants. They could just throw a bunch of EX classes in farming and challenge quests and bosses, which is very in theme with Ordeal Call already. And also, she's not even going to do that good damage against enemies that are not servants, you know, if they're also not Dragon or Roman. My number 3 and number 2 are tied. And it depends on what you are looking for in your account. And, that would decide which one is better than the other. So I want to talk about Tonalico first. So Tonalico was the servant that I severely underestimated last year in my hot take video and in my list. But she is definitely one of the strongest characters in the game, period. If you don't know, her main gimmick is her skill 3 starts at 5 turns cooldown instead of 0 turns. But her MP can reduce its cooldown by 1, and each additional overcharge stage would reduce its cooldown by 1 more. And the skill 3 itself is really broken, of course. It's party-wide 50 MP charge, 20% MP damage up for 3 turns, and guts. So if you get to activate her skill 3 in a farming comp, she's the best multi-core farmer, period, because of how much charge and buffs she gives the party. She gives the party 50 charge and 10% slow charge on her first skill. On top of that, 30% MP damage up from the skill 3, 20% attack up from the skill 2 that can potentially go to 30% if you have like party-wide HP reduction demerit characters like Koyan Light's first skill, because it scales more as your HP goes down. And it also makes stars, which also helps. And Tonalico herself essentially has 100% MP charge as well, because her first skill is another 50 MP battery. After Append 5 this anniversary, she can Buster Loop with a Black Grill when using Double Vitrobaram, which of course significantly boosted her single core looping performance compared to other Buster AoEs. Now, she is still pretty reliant on Black Grill for that damage, so if you don't have an MLB Black Grill, this aspect is not going to be that amazing, but still, that's a really cool thing to have. Her anti-evil is really good coverage, and it scales with MP levels. It's like Arcuate, it's kind of like a pay-to-win MP. So at MP5, she deals single target damage scaling to evil targets instead of AoE. But even at MP2, it's already better than a standard anti-trait, because a standard anti-trait is 150%, which is her at MP1. And evil's a very good trait to have counter against, not just because of how common it is, but also because you can apply it with someone like Ruler Moriarty and Nitocris Altar. Ruler Moriarty more for challenge quests, because it lasts for 3 turns, and Nitocris Altar more for farming, because it's a skill instead of on MP. And in general, she just has insane supportability, because we already talked about how much charge and damage she can provide the entire party when talking about her multi-core, but also her guts on her skill 3 is a really good survival skill. And on paper, it looks very not spammable, because it starts out at a 5-turn cooldown, and it's a 10-turn cooldown skill after you use it for the first time. But in reality, even if you just use her as like a sub-DPS support on your normal challenge quest team, that skill is on like a 7 to 6 turn cooldown, which is quite insane for this amounts of utility. And when your party members are at Guts HP, her second skill becomes a 60% attack up on like a 5-turn cooldown, which is ridiculous, right? Like, it's so much damage, and she can keep herself alive quite easily, because her MP also has like a 1-hit invul whenever she uses it. So even as just a pure support in challenge quests, she's really good. But if you build a team around her, she can spam her skill 3 as often as like every 3 turns. Like, a very fun team with her is Tonalico, Tamamo, and Himiko. So you always overcharge boost her as well as reduce her cooldown after her MP. So her skill 3 just keeps coming back, and it's obviously ridiculous because it's a party-wide 50 MP charge. So it also charges Tamamo and Himiko as well. So you just go into this endless cycle of you always have guts. She obviously still has her flaws. Her caster class still kind of holds her back. Like, if you're using her in a multi-core setup and you only have her at like MP1 and you're not hitting evil, then her damage is not going to be great, right? And secondly, because of that skill 3, in multi-core farming you still have to specifically build around it a little bit. But I think it's less of an issue because I really underestimated how many servants gives overcharge in this game. Like, so many random servants just have like a party-wide overcharge +1 as a random bonus effect thrown in. But technically, you still need specific party members for it to work well, instead of being able to be used with anyone like Tez. But obviously the payoff is massive. Overall, she's just not replaceable. There aren't any other units that can do something that she can do, and she does it very well as well. And her party-wide buffs are so good that she can serve as a pure support and outperform some meta supports even. Also, despite her caster class, because her anti-evil skills with her MP level, and also she can Buster Loop with double Vich Oberon while using a Black Grail, you can still use her as your main DPS, and she's gonna perform very well. She's more for people who wants more options and want a more unique servant that would not get replaced in the future, because I don't believe there's going to be a character that does anything even similar to what she does. The other character is, of course, Kukulkan. Like, what else can I say? I recently made a hot take on her. You should honestly just go watch that video, because I said everything I want to say there. I'm just going to give you a fast summary here, I suppose. She's the best all-around Buster AoE, because you literally cannot find a flaw in her skill set. She has everything you want in a DPS. She has good survival, she has a 2x3 turn evade, and a solemn defense on her skill 3 on relatively short cooldowns. She has good star gen, her MP makes 30 stars, and her passive makes 10 stars per turn. And her MP hits very hard and has wide coverage with anti-earth. And anti-threat to humanity is great for certain story bosses. Her skills are broken, because they take 10 stars to upgrade on each skill, but it doesn't matter because she makes so many fucking stars, and she's Buster, so you're running her with Koyan Light, who dumps 20 stars each as well. So you always get the upgrades on her skills. And because her skills have so much damage steroids, her skill 1 is 50% attack up, her skill 3 is 30% MP damage up, Buster up, and 50% crit up. And the first skill has a 5-turn cooldown, and the third skill has a 6-turn cooldown. So with double Koyan Light, you can double stack it by turn 2. Especially after a pen 5, you can double stack her skill 3 by turn 2 as well. This also makes her overall the best Buster Looper, tied with Arjuna Altar in my opinion. Because Arjuna Altar deals more against just completely traitless enemies, but if Kukulkan hits counterclass, hits Earth, she does more. Which is not as rare as it sounds. Like, it's actually quite common that she would be able to hit either Earth or counterclass, right? So after a pen 5, she's one of the most broken Buster Loopers in the game. Before a pen 5, she's not going to be as good as Arjuna Altar. Like, you can feel the damage not as good on wave 2, but her wave 2 damage just skyrockets after 9th Annie. And if NA implements a pen 5 early, oh boy, stupid character, right? Her Buster Looping damage after a pen 5, when using cranking, is like the same as other people when they get to use Black Grail. Which is, of course, very stupid, because yeah, she can't use Black Grail, but in an event that has a 50 MP starting charge damage CE, the Black Grail loopers lose all of their advantage compared to Kukulkan. Especially wave 2 damage, Kukulkan beats Melusine by a bunch, you know, even when she's using Black Grail on wave 2. Once again, watch my hot take on her, it's ridiculous. She also has really good single target damage, because once again, that's skill 3, 50% crit up, 30% buster up, and she has a triple buster deck. And she makes 10 stars every turn as a passive. And her MP makes 30 more stars, so she has guaranteed crits whenever she MPs on the next turn. Like, I don't understand, whatever, it's just stupid. And she's one of the best 120 targets, because she would beat basically every content in the game for you if you have her like hyper investment, right? And in terms of the cons, if you already have other top tier Buster AoE DPSs at high investment, like Morgan, like Arjuna Altar, and especially Mao Nobu, they perform quite similarly. Like, Mao Nobu also has a really strong self-attack up, which is very important in Buster Looping because Koyan Light doesn't give any attack ups. So if you have a lot of self-attack ups, your damage stacks very well. And she also makes like good amount of stars. She has triple Buster. But yeah, like in general, if you have a hyper invested in like main DPS Buster AoE, you might need to match your investment on Kukulkan to make her feel like as broken as she is in comparison, right? And that's honestly it. Like, that's a pretty big con because her role is technically replaceable by other characters, unlike Tonalico. But that's also the only con. Like, what other thing you can complain about fucking too many button presses during buster looping. Like, only during lottos that matters. Outside of lottos, it doesn't fucking matter, right? And when you are complaining about, man, my butterfingers would fuck up my button press sequence on a character, you know that character has like no flaws, because that's a fake like negative. And finally, in my opinion, the best SSR servant that's going to release next year in NA is Summer Castoria. I don't think anyone is surprised. Everything I said about her in my old list and in my hot take video is completely accurate. She's just that broken, and she's, in my opinion, the best single target arts servant in the game, period. She has a bread and butter critical skill set built into her, which is rare because a single target arts berserker usually don't have good access to that kind of stuff. She has star per turn, 5000% star absorb up, and 50% crit up, all built into one character. Like, you can compare to someone like Vlad, who makes 30 stars whenever he MPs, and it might sound like he's good at critting, but he can't absorb those stars because he's a berserker. She has total of 70 MP battery, a self 50 MP charge, and a targetable 20 MP charge. This makes her very easy to work with in farming, both in single core and in multi-core. And the targetable 20% MP charge also has a 2-stage overcharge boost as well as a party-wide MP gain boost. So it helps her card gain and MP refund, of course, but also it enables certain combos in multi-core. For example, Summer Castoria plus Tonelico is a super nice combo to build around for multi-core just because of that reason, right? And you can also put this overcharge boost on Caster Castoria in challenge quests so that her solemn defense, is 3 stacks for the entire party. She has a lot of survivals as a berserker. She has a invul tied to her 3-turn 50% arts up, just like base Castoria on her skill 3, but she also gives the entire party 1 hit of solemn defense whenever she MPs, which is really useful because this essentially means that you would never run out of solemn defenses to tank an enemy's AoE MP, because when you alternate between her MP and Caster Castoria's MP, you just never run out of this. She also has 3 anti-traits on her MP. She has Anti-Divine and Anti-Chaotic as power mods, which are both extremely common traits. And usually I would complain about power mods because they don't scale as well as super effective mods when you stack a bunch of buffs on her. But because she's actually quite crit-centric, her card damage is boosted quite a bit by these 2 power mods, so I don't have a problem with that. And her actual super effective mod is Threat to Humanity, which is not very useful in farming, but very good in boss killing, as we'll see in her performance for Super Recollection quests especially. She's very hard to wall. Like, for example, when I was talking about Draco, I said it's very easy for the game to stop her from doing damage, not for Castoria, because obviously Berserker is the most broken class for, DPSing in general, both for farming and just boss killing, but also foreigners. A lot of like Lovecraftian based foreigners, they are chaotic, divine, and threat to humanity. So Summer Castoria hits triple trait against them. So if you have a farming node where the final boss is like Abigail, Summer Castoria is still going to do really good damage against her despite her being foreigner, which is really stupid. Her performance is obviously like insane. She is super useful in most 90++ farming, and also especially this year's Super Recollection Quest reruns, she dominated all of the Minturn lists, right? She could frontline only Super Oberon, she could do 2-man only against Super Tezcatlipoca, and she could also do Super Bargues, which is a really difficult Minturn to do. Only 2 servants in the game could Minturn it. Now I might sound like super biased when I'm nerding out about her Super Recollection like Minturn performance, but it's really realistic, right? I'm not using her with like a super high RNG weird comp. She's just using Castoria and sometimes Lady Avalon as her support. So you're bringing that kind of team to a boss fight anyways, and she just accidentally deletes them because of how stupid she is as a character. And it's a Super Recollection quest. Like, you're not supposed to be able to Minturn these as easily, but she just does. So it's just testament to how good she is as a boss killer. In terms of cons, The first one is very common, but I disagree with, which is her party-wide solemn defense on MP interferes with the Caster Castoria's solemn defense, so you can't do Berserker Castoria MP into Caster Castoria MP to overcharge it. But my actual experience with using this character is that being able to just refresh solemn defense, even if it's just for one hit every turn, is better protection to your team than, you know, being able to overcharge your Caster Castoria's MP every now and then with your DPS. And also, she has a targetable 2-stage overcharge. Just throw that onto your Caster Castoria, right? Like, it's not that hard. The second con I can think of is probably Vlad is super popular for SSR tickets, and a lot of people might already have him at like MP3 or something. And you really need to match his MP level for you to feel like Castoria does really good damage. Especially when none of them are hitting traits, Vlad is going to outdamage her in terms of MP damage just because, you know, he has an upgraded MP and she doesn't. And overall, I think she's just the best single target in the game for boss killing, and a really top tier single target for multi-core farming, because she doesn't have really good party-wide buffs, but she has a really big battery, so usually you're building around her as the main DPS for multi-core, but still, you know, that's a great thing to have. That's how most single targets in multi-core do anyways, and she's just going to be your de facto single target if you decide to hyper invest in her, and you would never need another single target, period. Yeah, so that's the revamped list. As a summary, Tez Kalipolka is at number 5, Draco is at number 4, Tonalico and Kukulkan are tied at number 2 and number 3, and if you need a more like selfish-centric AoE buster, then go for Kukulkan, but if you need a more versatile AoE buster DPS that is sort of irreplaceable, then you should go for Tonalico. And then finally, Summer Castoria sits firm at number 1, being the best single target character in the game. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know how you feel about the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.